Welcome back, everybody, to the A Little Less Fear podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lino Martinez. I'm so happy and excited to welcome back. I believe this is the sixth time
I
that
think
Tina
so, yeah.
Erwin is on A Little Less Fear podcast. Quite amazing. So, Tina has studied metaphysics all of her life, gaining insight into the metaphysical world of magic and spirituality. She is the author of 8 books on metaphysics. Her writing comes from an intense desire to know and understand the hard science behind the unseen world of action and reaction, combined with a sincere desire to share this understanding with other knowledge seekers. Welcome back to the A Little Less Fear podcast, Tina. So awesome to see you again.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Lino. I love being on your show. It's such a blast.
It really is a blast. And I mean, I'm pretty sure we've met in multiple past lives because our connection is just really incredible. It's been over a year and a half that we've been connecting this way, and we've never met in this life in person.
Right.
But energetically, I definitely feel a really beautiful connection with you. So this
I
is
do
really a
too. It's
blessing.
as if we really are on the same wavelength. And I think we both have a real focus on service to other people.
Exactly.
And I mean,
Yes.
it's just all great from there.
Definitely agree with you. And I mean, definitely we're on the same channel. We're vibing the same on the same frequency. And karmically, I'm just really blessed to be seeing you again. I mean, and I hope one day I get to meet you in person in this life.
I
I
hope
think that
so
would be
too.
awesome. That would be really beautiful. So Tina has been on my show before. We have talked about karma. We've talked about psychic men. We've talked about feng shui. We've talked about crossing souls over. We've also talked about what happens when we die. And so, for people that have not heard of Tina Erwin on my other podcast episodes, she's an incredible, and I mean, honestly, I've never met anyone like you. I've never met a ghost helper or somebody that can help spirits or goals. Or I'm sorry, we don't use the word spirits. I remember,
That's
but
right.
souls, right? Souls to cross over to the other side because there's a lot of souls that get lost once they actually die. And so, I mean, I've just been constantly learning from you and gaining these insights, or maybe even becoming aware of things that inherently I already knew. So, thank you for bringing this to my awareness and constantly educating the world with your wisdom. It's really quite beautiful.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very honored.
I'm very honored. Yeah, thank you. So, upon thinking about what topic to discuss today, we decided to talk about some diseases, and one specific disease that comes to mind is cancer. And cancer just seems to be, not seems to be, it is very prevalent among all ages, from children, from babies to teenagers. And now it just seems to be what I'm noticing is that people are starting to get cancer younger and younger with diseases that used to take years to develop. So I start to wonder, well, what is going on here? And is it our diet? Is it our environment? It is a combination of our diet and our environment, or is it karmic? Or is it something within our energetic field that we're not aware of? What is causing and what continues to cause such a, a very detrimental and painful disease to go through and to witness for family members? So thanks so much for your authority, and thanks so much for your education and your background to come back here on the show to talk about such an intense subject. I really appreciate it.
Oh well, I'm glad to offer a slightly different view. I mean, I'm not an authority on cancer, but I think like everyone else, we've certainly observed it. Right now, people are experiencing what are called turbo cancers. They wake one morning and they have stage 4 cancer, and they just really didn't realize it. I mean, it's like overnight. So we're seeing things happen at an accelerating rate. And I'm hearing this from many individuals. So I think it's a very timely topic. And I don't think there's one answer. I think it's each person's experience is unique to them. So I think that, I mean, I'm not sure what starting point you want to use, but I think it's a unique situation that seems to have almost a universal encompassment. I mean, I think this is a global issue right now.
When we're talking about these cancers that are turbo cancers, for people that are tuning in for the first time, what does that mean?
From what I have studied, cancer used to be not necessarily that common. I mean, over centuries, people, I mean, you're going to die of something. What's your exit strategy?
Right.
Cancer, cancer has many, many, many facets. And sometimes it has to do with a need a person doesn't know they have. And I use the example that I've heard this over and over. Well, after I got cancer, my family rallied around me, and everyone was there for me, and we prayed together, and they visited me. And I can't tell you how amazing the experience was. And if I hadn't had cancer, I wouldn't have gotten my family together.
Sure.
And I think for a lot of people, they're receiving some desperately needed attention that they might not have previously had. Maybe they didn't know they needed this attention. Maybe there was something missing. And I guess I would like to find a way for people to fill that whatever is missing without having to have cancer. I
Right.
mean, would be nice to know that, gee, I need something and not be sick to get it, to
Right.
know how to ask for it. So I think there's a multiple areas. And the other element I'm seeing is some people are tired of being here, and cancer is an honorable exit strategy. And I have heard that, a couple times before too.
When you say you've
If
heard that a couple times before, how have you heard that before?
if you uh, nobody really in their right mind wants to commit suicide, but people find a way to decide to leave in more than one manner. Um, for some people, it's alcohol, which, in Conversations with God, Neil Donald Walsh talks about this, which I thought was extremely insightful. If you smoked and smoked and smoked and your lungs are filling and filling and filling, you're basically going down a road that's not going to have a positive outcome. If you're drinking or you're doing drugs, you're basically harming yourself or accelerating your exit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to be careful about my terms because these are really personal, deeply personal
Very
and
personal.
emotional
Yes.
experiences for people and their family members.
Right.
And sometimes if you have a family member who has had a life of profound disappointment or a life of tremendous bitterness, and either maybe they felt like they failed one too many times, or they were incredibly unlucky in love. And unlucky is a really not a very good term. They just never seem to find a loving relationship that could take them, into their future. They just
Sure.
they just couldn't find that. And there is a level of depression that sets in. And then sometimes there's a level of almost grinding depression where you're not going to come out of it. And that depression starts to poison the body.
Absolutely.
And the person doesn't say, gee, I think I'm going to poison my body today. That's
Right.
not how it
There's not
works.
any clear awareness into this. They're just
There's
in this
they're
cycle.
they're going along each day and they're doing the very best they can.
Right.
But this feeling of failure, this feeling of unhappiness, maybe you were really bitter about what happened with your children, or maybe your children turned away from you, or maybe you you lost a parent at an early age, and that sense of abandonment left this scar of grief and depression that never quite healed. And that constant hurt is is a chronic irritant. Well, sometimes in nature, when you have a constant irritant, you make pearls.
Right.
But human beings They don't make pearls.
Right.
Sometimes the body starts to break down because it can't overcome such a low frequency as that level of sadness or depression. So that's one element of it. I mean, is that something you have observed?
Well, what I've observed is with disease itself is that there is, and I've observed this even with myself, where there was definitely an emotional connection, an emotional entrapment within my body
Right.
when I was not able to express myself certain ways. But it took a lot of meditation and self love and grounding myself and really getting to know myself energetically and how my body was being affected. So, but I just wonder, what about people that don't have these tools? You know, I've gained these tools through my own inner wisdom and my own suffering, and I don't want to say that people need to suffer or have to suffer to get some clarity, because I really feel that it's really important for this type of information to be headed towards people's auric field, so that they can have an understanding on how to prevent it before it happens. And so I mean, how could we even prevent these cancers if people do have an understanding that energetically it's being trapped in our body, because it's a constant, it can one the way that you brought it up right now, a constant hurt is a constant irritant causing some disease such as cancer. And if somebody isn't aware that they're constantly hurt or constantly irritating their energetic field or their energetic body, I mean, what can people do to bring this into awareness? That's just a question that I ask myself, because it just seems so prevalent. And people are they now starting to kind of become aware? I'm not sure.
I don't know how we could know if people are becoming aware. I think that uh, if you have a long-standing hurt, and I have known several people personally who died of pancreatic cancer. We'll just pick this one to talk
Mhm.
about. Well, the pancreas represents a sweetness in life. Now, neither of these people had any diabetes, they weren't diabetic, but their pancreas, when you have pancreatic cancer, it's as if there's, no matter how successful a life you have, or a life that either is or isn't successful, if you have something that's causing you to feel a bitterness, that bitterness goes after that which should bring you sweetness, the sweetness of life.
Yeah.
But instead, it's turning almost to an acid. And it's, you can't, I mean, you just don't turn pancreatic cancer around.
No.
Most people don't. And the people that I knew died literally within 2 to 3 months from the time it was diagnosed. I mean, they were just gone. This is astounding. So pancreatic cancer is a type of cancer where there's a long-standing bitterness, resentment, and anger that's just never healed.
Yeah.
And looking at the personalities and what the individuals went through, you can begin to see, okay, well, I can see where that came from. But I don't know of anyone who can live a whole life and not suffer. Do you?
No. No. Everybody suffers one way or another. I mean, everybody's suffering one way or another.
Suffering has to have meaning. If it didn't, we wouldn't have it at all. And when you can attach meaning to the suffering, and you can go, all right, I'm suffering now. What can I do to come to terms with my suffering or my anger and resentment and and my emotional pain? And if you can't find that inner wisdom of self-talk where you go, whatever's is going on inside me, it isn't working, I need to work it out. And in the spiritual framework, we call it doing the work,
Yeah.
where you sit down with a good psychotherapist or a good spiritual practitioner who doesn't just sit there for an hour and take notes and say, see you next week, but
Right.
who really challenges you to look at yourself and what are you willing to do to heal. And Carolyn Meese wrote an amazing book called Why People Don't Heal and How They Can. And I know we talk about a lot of different authors. We talk about my book sometimes, but I think it's some great resources. Louise Hay wrote a wonderful book, You Can Heal Your Life. And she healed herself from terminal cancer
She sure did.
twice.
Yeah.
Twice. She had a horrific childhood.
Yes.
And and she took her suffering and turned that suffering into inner growth and knowledge, and wrote this book that millions of people have used and found to be very healing for them. And one of her famous quotes is, "It's only a thought, and a thought can be changed."
Mm-hmm.
And I think these are, she just, I mean, I've read her book repeatedly, because no matter how well you think you are in your field, you are always a student of someone else who has really arrived in their field, and they are amazing in their field, and you can always learn something from them. I feel as if a lot of times the things we hear as children program us. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
she said when she said, it's what she meant when she said, it's only a thought, and a thought can be changed. I saw this quote on Instagram, and I sent it to my son, because he's a wonderful dad. My son and my daughter-in-law are wonderful parents. Both kids have kids, are great parents. And they're careful what they say to their children. And when you say to your daughter, "You're a wonderful person, I believe in you, I, I want the best for you, and let's talk about whatever the situation is," you aren't just programming something in their head. You're also programming the cellular structure of the body.
Absolutely.
This goes back to Masaru Emoto's Messages from Water. I'm sure you've heard of
I
that.
love it. Yes, definitely.
Well, I know this is slightly off topic, so bear with me. If when you were a child, the things you heard were so toxic that the cells of your body imaged themselves with that toxic energy, and it sets itself up like a time bomb for the future.
Right.
Can be a shorter life or a longer life. And if that's what happens, how do you avoid that? And if someone said something to you that was really hurtful and you remember it, then maybe as an offering, you could say, well, I had this event, or someone said this to me, and the emotion I felt was this. But what I learned from that event, that emotion, that set of words, was that I can take them and change them. I can become who I really want to be on every level. I don't have to believe what that person said about me. If there was something that I need to change, then I can choose to change and maybe be better than I was. And if a person feels abandoned by a parent who died when they were a child, I mean, it wasn't a deliberate abandonment, although that certainly does happen, then they can say, maybe my focus this lifetime is to learn how to live without my mother or my father or my grandparents or my sibling. This is a lesson for me to learn to overcome my grief at this loss or this feeling of abandonment. But that feeling doesn't have to define me. I can define who I am. So it's about being, your podcast is a little less fear. If you have a little less fear of abandonment, a
So,
little less fear of being less than someone thinks you are, or a little less fear of never being good enough, maybe the whole point is face that fear, own it, and take your power back. And then you rebuild yourself because you have that power. Change your cellular structure. And then maybe cancer will not be an experience that you have. That's a thought. It's just a concept.
It's an incredible thought, actually. And what I'm thinking is, so, the incredible thing about being able to change our chemical structure here, simply by changing the way we think or the messages that have been told to us throughout childhood is really fascinating because, again, what we were talking about, Louise Hay, so a lot of our beliefs are thoughts that we keep thinking. And these beliefs are thoughts that we kept thinking because it's been planted in our mind from the time that we've been children, and we start to believe these things and we start to adapt to these beliefs and changing our chemical compounds and our chemical structure of our entire body. And then that's how disease starts to become created, because there is a disharmony. Things are not synchronized the way we need them to be in order for us to thrive, because of these thoughts and of these beliefs that we have believed that have been implanted from the time that we're children. So I have a question, though, in regards to this. If And this is in regards to divine timing, Tina Irwin, because you're saying all this, and as you're talking, I'm thinking, well, if we are exactly where we're supposed to be, and this, I'm not sure if I 100% truly feel this right now at the moment while we're talking about this, but if we're exactly where we're supposed to be at every single moment, are we not supposed to, quote unquote, just supposed to go through this disease process, or go through this hard childhood of having to come through on the other side and develop the tools and the skills that we need to overcome some of these obstacles? I mean, at what point do we actually have control over this? And at one point are we supposed to go through this? And when is it divine timing?
Well, it's a really powerful and very complicated question. So I'm going to offer an opinion because nobody died and put me in charge of all the answers.
Sure, but I love your opinions. Yeah.
Well, if we come into each life for the experience, and you hear a lot of people say, oh, you only live once. But if
Yeah.
you go back to the concept that, well, maybe we live a whole lot of times, and maybe we have made that life, that mistake, or that issue has come up repeatedly, because I've seen that there are patterns in families. I've seen patterns where there is abortion. Generation after generation after
Yes.
generation has an abortion.
Right.
Or there is violence in the family, or there's chronic problems with money. Nobody's ever had any money, or they always have so much money they've lost their sense of what it's like to have to struggle for something. So as you experience something, the point of living a life after life is saying, in this life I'm going to make a different choice. In
Okay.
this life I'm going to say, you know, I have more control over my life in certain situations. So this isn't going to happen this lifetime. And is what is perfect order? If perfect order is karma presents you with the same problem or issue you've had in the past, but this time you step back and you think through the problem and you make a different choice. Well, now you're going along and you're kind of skewed. And now you come back, but not only are you on the straight and narrow, you have now widened it and spread it, and you're positively affecting this whole cog and wheel system of all of those people that you're interconnected with. It's like if one person starts their spiritual path with an innocence and an earnestness to heal themselves, they can make mighty strides. Well, let's say that that person does that and they still get cancer and they die.
Mhm.
Let's say that they have made, oh my gosh, amazing strides. They are adored by all these people and revered and on and on and on. but this person got cancer and bingo, they're gone.
Mhm.
How do I wrap my brain around that? Well, here's another opinion. What
Okay.
if that person learned what they needed to learn and they got what they needed in that life, and then they got as much as they could accomplish in that life? And maybe there was a resentment that they could not resolve no matter what they did. And that part of it programmed them, and it causes a dis-ease inside the body, and the body died. And that soul is crossed over. Well, if that's the case, then that person received what they needed and they left in the right time for them. And we love them. We do our best to cross them over without prejudice or judgment. And who knows what their next life will be, or what their next opportunities will be. So it's not, well, they didn't study hard enough or they weren't spiritual enough. I really don't think that's it. I think you can have a very, very spiritual person who dies earlier than anyone would have liked to see them leave. But maybe that's all that person could handle this lifetime and they left. So I'm opening the door to a slightly more compassionate view.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes with women, maybe this is true for men, but I know it's true for women, they have a lot of problems with loving their bodies. Women find fault with their bodies. This is why plastic surgery is addictive. Well, if I have just one more procedure and just one more operation, I'll be more perfect and more perfect and more perfect. And they're chasing that ball in the swimming pool, but they can never quite catch it because their
Right.
bow wave just keeps pushing it forward.
Yeah.
If you learn to love your body, maybe you still have other things you're working through, but you love your body and you find those spots of dis-ease in your body and you work to heal them. Maybe you can live longer because your path is very different from the path of the person who got what they needed and they left. That's why you can't. There's nothing hard and fast. There's no neat little box you can check and say, well, if you do this, 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 and this, you're going to live to
Right.
be 100.
Right.
It just doesn't work that way.
I love this perspective. So in un and so in understanding everything that you just talked about right now, which is also fascinating to me. It is divine timing. And the your time right now is your time regardless, and you are exactly where you're supposed to be and be doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing because ultimately we're on a path that we've either been on before and we've haven't learned a specific lesson, or we are learning a lesson, and even if we've learned the lesson, perhaps our soul's life at that moment, our body will tire, and we've can dust ourselves off at the very end and say that we're able to learn something from a specific circumstance or circumstances. But yet, even if there is any type of disharmony that wasn't worked through, it could still turn into a disease of some sort, or like cancer or something
Right.
else. But I almost said the word karmically, but we haven't talked about karma yet in response to this. But ultimately, we are exactly where we're supposed to be.
Yes. Ultimately, we are where we're supposed to be. And if we can recognize that, if we can recognize that, and then look at, okay, well, I'm where I'm supposed to be. And if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing in my mind to the best of my ability,
Yes.
then you can find a place of ease within you.
Yes.
And some people are simply tired of living. I think we need to acknowledge that. I heard this recently. I heard someone say, life is kind of hard and I hope I just go early.
I've heard that before many times as well.
Well, it's not to say, oh my gosh, you shouldn't feel that way. That's a bad thought. What if the soul is just tired on a lot of levels? What if the soul has just done everything that they know how to do to be a good person, or they've made some mistakes that they don't even know how to wrap their brain around what they've done. So they're struggling with that. We can't look at a person and have any conception of what they've been through,
Right.
what they need, or why they have that illness. Is it karmic? Is it something that they have to learn from? And if they only learned this much of it, did they make progress, or were they supposed to make this much?
Yeah.
I think God's really patient.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that if you make any progress in understanding yourself or doing something differently or responding to something very differently than you might have, that's progress. That's spiritual progress. If you've found a way to build your own private relationship with God, which is nobody else's business, that's wonderful progress.
Sure, absolutely.
If you were damaged because of a religion or religious belief or a dogma or whatever, but you didn't allow it to separate you from God, that's huge progress. If you, I had a client whose son took his own life many years ago, and she crossed him over. Well, we know that people who take their own lives do so life after life after life after life. But if in this life, one of two things can happen. Faced with that overwhelming desire to do that, you stop, you seek help, and you turn that corner and you don't do that. That one act is massive progress.
Because there's a
If
ripple effect after from that one progress.
that one progress, you did not take your life,
Hmm.
and that's just enormous. But if you have taken your life over millennia and you ended up in a place that was filled with darkness, and then you reincarnate, you didn't receive the help you needed. So in this case, this woman's 17-year-old son took his own life. And we've heard this thousands of times. It's happening every day all over the world, very sadly. But she crossed him over. And then I wrote a prayer that would help people to send long-term prayers to the person who took their own life while they're in the heaven world, so they can continue to feel the love of that parent
That's beautiful.
or that spouse or child or whoever. It heals the family member and it facilitates the healing in the heaven world. But maybe this time, because that person was crossed over, they got a much more elevated level of healing they would ever have gotten before. And perhaps this was the greatest gift that parent could have provided. Was it a good thing? Was it a bad thing? That's not for us to judge. She continued to love him. She didn't condemn him. And she is at peace now. I can't begin to tell you how it feels to know where he is and to continue to send him prayer and to feel confident about it.
Yeah.
Well, if you are resentful because a family member developed cancer and they left you too early, there might be an anger there.
Hmm.
And if you felt like they should have done X or Y or Z, it's because it's something that you wanted. Yes, you wanted more time with them. You wanted to enjoy that person. if you can help cross them over, maybe they're going to get a greater level of healing than they might have otherwise. And maybe they will heal on an entirely different level. I think that's the greatest hope we can have. And we know that there is a cancer represents a deep hurt.
Yes.
Breast cancer for women is that there's some sort of almost motherly emotional hurt. And that, because that's the heart chakra area. Men have heart attacks. Women have cancer there. The uterine and the cervical and the breast cancer are all cancers relating to being female. Either you were sexually abused, or you were raped, or something happened to you and it created an emotional scar. And maybe you worked to get it healed. Maybe you didn't even know how to get that healed. And then the person dies of that. Help them by crossing them over. Continue to send them your love and your prayers. You might find that there's healing even inside of yourself at their loss. They're not lost, actually. They simply shifted their existence to another place. And even though
Yes.
we miss them terribly, you can't go through life without experiencing grief. Even though you
Right.
miss that person terribly, you have to learn to live past grief too. That's
Yes.
another one of the lessons in this massive process.
Learning to live past the grief, because a
Right.
lot of people don't. They stay stuck in the cycle of grief. And then going back to what we were talking about as far as your body's water, your body's chemistry, if you're constantly in grief, you're constantly having grieving neurons, grieving body water, grieving cells, and that's going to continue to turn into dis-ease, disharmony within the body if we're not able to get past grief.
That is one of the biggest challenges. When you love, the act of loving another human being, especially more than yourself, the act of loving fills your cells with light. Cells filled with light are healthy cells. Grief, it's like this shroud that you're in. And depending on how your loved one died, the density of the shroud is determined by their method of death. They were murdered. Horrible things happened to them. The ability to overcome that grief is a challenge I hope no one ever has to face, but many, many people do. What heals grief? Of course, it's time, but it's a willingness to embrace the person in a new way. Someone you
Yes.
love has died, and maybe you never heard of crossing them over, but you never stopped loving them.
Right.
And you continue to send them your love, not with your grief, but with hope. So if you fill yourself with hope for them for their next life, and you fill yourself with love for them that is eternal, you can begin to turn the lights back on in your cellular structure. And when you can do that, you can take your body out of that darkness. It doesn't mean you don't still miss them. It doesn't mean that that feeling doesn't overwhelm you sometimes. I call it a grief wave.
Oh yeah.
It can be a smell, or you're eating the smell of food that person just dearly loved, or the smell of a cigar or a perfume, or a flower, or hear a song. You're transported back and you're standing beside that person.
Easily.
Those are important things. You had an experience with this person, and it was precious. And when you learn to still love them and treasure all the experiences you had, you have set the soul who died free to move on to whatever is next for them. But they take your love with them. Love doesn't die. You miss the physicality of the person. You miss the potential with the person.
Yes.
When you have a relationship with someone, I mean, it's part of all the years I spent in the Navy, but it's a relationship. You have a momentum of going through life with that person. If you're married or you have children, you get up together, you get ready for work together, you plan your weekends together. If they're a relative, you plan holidays or events together. You see each other, you hug each other, you touch. You have a momentum of expectation in the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Sudden death stops that.
Yes.
But the momentum of your emotion and your relationship cannot stop on a dime. If you shut down the engines of a super tanker, it still takes 20 plus miles to stop it.
Wow.
20 miles to stop a super tanker in these new, let's say you're going at flank speed and you're this icon of the seas cruise ship, is the largest ship afloat, I think.
Yeah.
It's going to take a little more than 20 miles to bring that big boy to a stop. That's what happens when you love someone to the depth of your core. I had a remarkable event happen many years ago. We were visiting, our daughter got her master's degree. She got an MBA at the University of Bath in England. And we were visiting the Bath Cathedral. That's a beautiful place. The whole town, the whole atmosphere is just wonderful. And my husband and I and our daughter were having a wonderful time. And we were in this cathedral, Bath Cathedral, and they had all of these crypts that lined the walls of the cathedral and all the things that were written. And there was one, and this aunt is talking about the death of her niece. And as I read it, I realized that I was the aunt and my daughter was the niece. And the grief that I felt in that moment, 400 years before, came back to me like it happened yesterday.
You mean it was like a past life memory that you had that you
It was a
recollected?
past life. It was a past life memory that was so powerful and so real. I almost collapsed with the grief. And yet I got to have another life with her,
Yeah.
a fabulous life, a longer life, a happy life.
Yeah.
And it enabled me to have this staggering perspective on the power of love, of reincarnation, of grief. Grief allows us to express the emotion about the person. That's not a bad thing. If you loved your child, if you loved your cat, if you loved your dog, when you love and that which you love has died, you have to express the emotion because it helps you stop the momentum of your relationship in a healthy way. Is this making any sense?
It definitely makes sense to express the emotion of the amount of love that impacted your entire being. But at what point, Tina, I mean, it allow yourself to express this emotion of intense love and grief that you had with somebody. There's a momentum and it's not going to stop right away because the momentum has been going on for years, especially if whoever you've lost, the momentum is going and you just can't stop this momentum, which is why grief comes in waves.
Right.
And but what if somebody doesn't want to let go and they feel closer to their loved one by grieving? How can they turn that into a loving feeling? How can somebody differentiate? Oh, I have to turn this grief into love. How can they do that if they are feeling closer to their crossed over loved one by crying for them, by smelling their clothes, or just constantly being in that darkness, as we were saying, that heaviness.
When someone is grieving on that intense a level, they require a great deal of patience. And if you're the person helping them to grieve, it's a very hard task.
It
It's
is.
not up to you to change them. It's not up to you to stop them from grieving or help them get over it. They're not going to get over it. What you're helping them do is learning to live without that person beside you, accepting that this person has a different path now, and so do you.
Mm-hmm.
They need physical contact, they need hugging, they need touching, they need the socialization so that they grief is isolating.
Yes, it is.
When you're grieving, you feel as if no one on earth has experienced the level of grief that you feel. I get it. It's personal, it's unique. And each day, if each day feels like a nightmare, like you can't even get up, it's almost crippling. And sometimes you have to use mechanical means to help you. Because what's happened is your body is full of adrenaline and chemical hormones that are almost acting like a poison for the body. And if I could, make a suggestion, after initial grief, after initial whatever happened, you need rescue remedy, which is a Bach flower remedy.
A what remedy?
It's called Bach, BACH, Bach flower.
Okay.
And it's called rescue remedy. And it starts to help you wash or balance out the adrenaline in your body.
Oh.
It's really, real. I keep it in my purse at all times. But when you are facing long-term grief, there's another remedy made by Bach called Star of Bethlehem,
I've heard of it.
ironically. And Star of Bethlehem dramatically helps you with grief. Now, there's another company owned by a friend of mine. And it's called Botanical Alchemy. Botanical Alchemy. And they make a product called Lighten Grief.
Light
Uh,
and grief.
lighten, like reducing, lighten
Okay.
grief. They have another one called Trauma, Mental Focus. And I'm offering that because sometimes it's as if you just can't get past the intensity of your grief. And that's what I mean by a mechanical means that's not going to harm you. They're flower remedies. And when my brother died in 2017, and not only is there a death, but you have the estate and all the family. It's this massive overwhelm. Even after all the helpful relatives leave, you're still reeling. You're so out of balance. How do you get your balance back?
Yeah.
That path of healing, it's like you're stumbling on the path. And I've had this experience several times in my life. Excuse me. And these remedies, these humble little bottles, you just put a little bit of this, just a few drops under your tongue. Maybe you need to do it 5 times a day. And it rebalances you. It helps you bring you out of shock. It helps to bring you out of emotional pain. I made what's called a combination bottle with the remedies from Botanical Alchemy. And the owner's Clifton Harrison. A shout out to Clifton. It makes remarkably fabulous products that I own every single one he has, every single one. He has an aura spray that your aura is just so painful, and this helps calm that pain. When you can do those things, It helps you to rebalance. People are talking to you and you see their mouth move, but you don't really hear what they say.
Yeah,
Say, gee, I'm sorry for your loss. And you go, really? What does that mean? What am I
right.
supposed to do with that statement?
Exactly.
They don't know what to say. Okay. When you take these remedies, every time you have a grief wave, if you take, one or more or 5 or 6 of these remedies. At one point, I was on 15 of them. I was so overwhelmed. He and I were incredibly close. We have many, 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 many lifetimes together. And I helped him through the dying process, and he did die of cancer. And I just adored him. I knew he was dying, so I had some preparation. But if a death is sudden, like my niece died when she was 6, she sat on the sofa and said, Mommy, I feel hot. And she just dropped dead in front of my sister. That is a sudden death. And the horror and the astonishment of it affect you on a more massive tidal wave level. That's why I always feel like how someone died is going to have a direct effect on how you grieve and how you recover. How whatever happens to you, it's a really nice idea to take some of these remedies to help your body and clear your mind. He has one called mental focus, and he has one called bright mornings. Why would you want to take a remedy called bright mornings? Because it gives you hope that you will find a bright morning again instead of waking up day after day to emotional darkness. And I would offer another thing that it helps to remove guilt. People, I'm not sure why, but they always go to this place. If only I had, or if only they had, or what, I should have done. Just throw guilt out the window. It's not welcome at your dinner table, let me assure you.
Oh yeah.
And just take the remedies that you can, help the people around you, and get up and put one foot in front of the other each day and start a little bit at a time and start to put your life together and give yourself some time to chart a new course without this person in your life. Whether it's cancer or group A strep or a car accident or a tidal wave, whatever happens, death is going to come to all of us in some way, shape, or form. And maybe the best we can hope for is leaving those around us with some wisdom and knowledge on how to deal with the loss as they move through their life, because loss will come to all of us at some point or another.
That's a 100% fact right there. Tina, what happens or what can happen to if we don't take these flower remedies and we don't help our grief? What can happen to our loved one's soul on the other side, on in their dimensional side, wherever they're at, if we're constantly grieving them? Can they be affected?
That's a really astute question. So thank you for asking that. I crossed over a doctor who died in a motorcycle accident. He was a neighbor of mine. He's a really amazing orthopedic surgeon, and he hit a skunk, slid his motorcycle,
Oh
and
wow.
slammed into water pipes and died instantly.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, it was bam. And it's like, you were 66. What were you doing on a motorcycle?
Yeah.
But he said, I loved it. Oh my gosh, I was so happy. He says, I had a great life. And he said, but my family won't let me go. They're wrapping these black cords around me. And he said, if you don't cross me over, I don't know what's going to happen. Sometimes the living haunt the dead. Their grief is so great. They don't want to let go of this person they've loved to the core of their being.
Right.
Maybe the greatest gift to them is to let them go, to willingly cross them over and feel the lightness of not having that soul with you constantly because you're holding on. I can't let you go. I can't let you go. But it's like, I'm holding on, I'm holding on, I'm holding on. How long can you do that without your hands becoming in pain? If you're holding on like this, and finally someone says, Isn't that really uncomfortable? Let's open up your hands. So, what happens when you open up your hands is you let light in.
Yes.
You open up and you relax your hands, you relax your body, and you let them leave and cross over. You invite an angel to escort them. When you do that, something inside you gets to heal too,
True.
because you have to learn to let go of them. And when you let go of them, it doesn't mean you love them any less.
Mm-hmm.
It means that you respect their new path. And that path is not next to you in a mortal body, it's in the spiritual realms, in an etheric body. Especially when they're in the heaven world, they get healing and knowledge, and they can ask questions, and there's so much goodness that happens to them. It's a wonderful way to think of them. They can still hear your prayers, they still know you love them. That part's never going to change. What changes is that you start to heal too.
Mm-hmm.
You start to wake up and go, maybe today won't be as difficult as yesterday. You have a list of things you have to get done. Okay, pay your bills first.
Right.
Okay, make sure you have food. Okay, you got 2 things done today. Whoa, that's a great day.
Yeah.
And then each week add something else to your have to get done list. And then applaud yourself for what you've been able to do. Don't find fault with yourself for what you didn't do or shouldn't have done. Find something good about yourself for what you are doing. And in that way, slowly but surely, one positive step in front of another, you will begin to be better. The other thing those flower remedies do is help you to sleep. They're
Oh.
not a narcotic. They're not a medicine. All they do is they reduce the crippling effect of too much adrenaline in the body. They soften the emotions that are in the body. When you have more sleep, your auric field is stronger. When you have more sleep, you can face the challenges that each day presents. Your family still needs you. Your office
True.
wants you back at work. Your neighbor wants to talk to you but doesn't know what to say. It seems like a lot. Again, you'll wake up one morning and you won't need those remedies. They'll be, oh, yeah, they were really helpful, but I'm okay now. They were helpful and they were sort of heaven sent because they're flowers. They're
They are
like
heaven
God's
sent. Yeah.
magic. They're like
Definitely.
God's magic wands.
And I love flowers.
Well,
I
there was
love
a there
flowers.
was a an Asian guy who had terminal cancer, and he went to this beautifully designed, commercial nursery, and he would sit in the garden and talk to people all day. And the more he was with the flowers and he talked to people, he woke up one day and he didn't have cancer anymore. And he was happier. And he was in nature and he was with people. It's when you continue to love and you don't close your heart to love, you heal.
When you continue to love and don't close your heart to love, you heal. I
That's
love
really
this.
important. If you have a child who dies, there's a fear that never leaves you. Is another
Mhm.
child going to die? Oh my gosh. Learning to trust is also very difficult after someone precious to you dies.
Sure.
When you can be more at peace with yourself, you can go back to learning to trust again. It's not easy, but it can be done. And your long term health will benefit. It's all about living. You still have to live and function and grow. And when you grow from the experience of grief, then you can be of much greater service or help to someone else.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness, this has been really incredible. Going back on grief, what's considered holding on to someone? I mean, what's consider okay? What's considered constantly holding on? Like, when is it okay? For example, my brother passed away a little over a month ago, and I have a T-shirt of his that I'm still smelling, and occasionally I'll sleep with it. Is that still holding on too much to and not allowing his soul to go to his healing journey? Or is it the way that I grieve? For example, let's say that I hold on to his t-shirt and I smell it and I say, "I love you," I'm just giving the love back that you gave to me. I can feel a difference in that vibration versus holding on to it and crying and saying, "I wish you were here right now." I feel the difference. I feel they're both grief, but one of them is more on the process of allowing his energy to flourish, and one of them is more in the process of trying to keep their etheric body in our dimension. Is this correct?
I believe that's absolutely correct. I think I actually warmed up. Take off my coat here.
So it's in the way you grieve. You can grieve by wishing love and feeling into the essence of love versus into the essence of something being lost.
Yes, if you're angry that the person died and left you, and you're holding on to your anger toward them, they're going to feel that. If and remember, a month isn't very long. A month is not long at all. Many people think you have to get rid of all memories of them. You get rid of their pictures, you do all of those things. Talk about the person. Remember the funny things they did, the crazy habits they had, or the experiences. Oh, I remember when we did. Wasn't that the best time? Or I remember growing up that. You are celebrating the individual. That's not morbid.
Right. Okay.
Pictures of them, they're part of your life.
Yeah.
Don't deny that. Embrace that. I have a picture of my niece who died. I think she's still beautiful. I love seeing that picture of her. I have pictures of my brother with me. And I feel their love. I feel that I can, when I think of them, I smile at all the amazing experiences we had together. And then I'm grateful for the people who are in my life in a physical way. Because if you're holding on so tightly to the person who left, then you're not embracing your experiences with the people who are still physically with you.
That's so true.
And if you can't think of anything but your focus is the person who died, then your heart, you aren't embracing or accepting or feeling the love of the people who are still alive. Sometimes you see this where uh, a child dies and the focus is entirely on the child who died. The child who's still there had nothing to do with that death. I mean, nothing. It's like they're now a second class citizen. That did not happen in my family, thank goodness. But I have seen this happen.
Mhm.
And those other children will never be as good as the child that died. Well, that means that that parent is holding on to the child who died for dear life. They're not letting in the love of the children who are still there,
Mhm.
or the relatives, or the nieces, or the nephews. It's how are you balancing it? And I understand this feeling of my husband spent 42 years at sea. And when we were first married, and he would leave, I was grieving. I mean, you're on a submarine and it's not like you can make a phone call.
Right.
It was like a death, but it happened, every time, every cycle. It's like so many times a year. It's like how this feels horrible. And I would stand in the closet and smell the cold that was on his clothes or his coat. Or I'd sleep on his side of the bed and look over and not miss me. Isn't that silly? but it's how I learned how to deal with all those coming and goings.
Hmm.
And I developed that rhythm and the trust that he would be back. So it's like he would leave, but he would come back. Well, isn't that reincarnation? You don't have that person this lifetime anymore. You'll see them again and again and again. And if you're able to cross over and meet them, I can't begin to describe the joyous nature of that encounter.
Yeah,
It's just so beautiful.
that is really
And
beautiful.
and you have to have some tools, whether it's holding on to something they had, a doll or a jacket or a sweater or a t-shirt or their car keys, because it has their essence, it has their frequency on it. Those are normal things. They're just normal things. And over time, you'll use them less. But if that helps you to get past the early days of grief, are just so hard. When my niece died, I would wake up sobbing. It's like, I don't know what happened in the middle of the night, but I would wake up and I would just be sobbing and sobbing. And I had to learn how to work through that grief. No one escapes this. It's
Hmm.
it's learning how to help yourself, because a lot of times you're not just grieving the person who died. You're grieving who you are without them.
Hmm.
You have an identity with that person. You're the mother, you're
Yeah.
the husband, you're the brother, you're the sibling, you're the
Right.
mom, the grandparent. You have an expectation. That child, you're never going to see them get married or go to high school or have a recital. You're never going to be a grandparent to that child's children. All of these expectations are crushed in that moment.
Oh yeah.
And that person is, never going to see you in your old age or all the things that you're doing. And maybe that's how it is supposed to be in the divine order. We don't all need 100 experience filled years. Sometimes we need 5 years or 10 years or 65 years or 50 years. You don't
Hmm.
need the whole thing. And when that is the right time, the person leaves. And then it's up to us to kind of get ourselves out of the way and look at the person's life and how they lived and find joy in your memories. Fill
Yeah.
yourself with the joy of the memories you have of them if they are good. What happens if someone dies and they were your nemesis?
Right.
They made your life a living hell. Then you have to process, this person was so difficult. And I am grateful that I learned this from this person. I learned what compassion doesn't look like. I learned what poor leadership looks like. I learned this and I learned this. That gives meaning to a turbulent relationship.
It does. Thank you so much. So a few things before we end. I know this is just so fascinating and I don't want to let you go, Tina. I mean, I there's the whole fantasy of when I cross over that my loved ones will be waiting for me. That my brother will be there, my uncle will be there, my grandma, my grandpa, that they're all gonna be like, "Hey," I mean, does that happen? Have you seen that happen? Are they
Oh,
really?
yeah.
So it's a real deal for real thing. I love it.
When my sister was married, they hadn't been married very long. And then her father in law passed away. And this was a man who adored children and he loved his grandchildren. Well, several years later, when my niece died and I crossed her over, and I saw just as she stepped into the light, her grandfather was on bended knee welcoming her.
Oh, how
It's an image
beautiful.
I will never forget. And it just swept her up and hugged her. And it was the most happy image. And I've so many thousands of people over. and they say, "There's my Grammy, she raised me," and "I see my mama," and "Oh my gosh, there's my daughter," and one guy's, "There's my cats. Oh my God, I love my cats."
Oh wow.
It's love. It's what it is. And the movie
Yeah.
goes, Patrick Swayze at the very last scene, he says, "Oh, you can't imagine there's so much love. Oh, there's so much love," he says. And that is so true. And you would want them to feel that love. That's why I'm always the big advocate for cross them over, help them out. And then the welcome you get when it's your turn is, it's not possible to describe that level of happiness and joy.
Well, I think this is the first time I cry on my show. That's really beautiful.
Yeah, we see each
Thank
other
you.
again and again.
Yeah. Well, I'm really looking forward to that. Definitely. Whew. All right. Well, this has been incredible. Well, thank you so much, Tina, for
Thank you for having
your
me.
beautiful energy. I have a poem for you.
Oh, great. I'm so excited.
Okay, here it goes. Tina Erwin. I've been on a path not many have crossed, for I welcome light and pour into souls to hold them to their truest, purest nature, with a sincere grasp on what it is to hold hands with the divine. For it's in this divinity that I find the wisdom of eternity, and allow it to speak to me through me, and hold it close to feel its serenity, and in joy dance with completion. It can't all be done all at once, but at once it can be loved. And in this quest, a badge to show my mission will one day be complete. Until then, I surf the journey in which I explore to find the finest jewel in life called harmony. And thank you for allowing me to tune into your energy and write that.
Can I have a copy of that, please? That's really, really
Absolutely. I'll
beautiful. I
I'll
would
type it
love
up
to have
and I'll send it to you. Absolutely.
thank you. I would love to share that with my family. That was really, I'm deeply honored.
Thank
I'm
you.
deeply, deeply honored.
And as I am as well. Tina Irwin, everybody, this connection is just the real deal here. And you're the real deal. We're the real deal together.
Yes,
Here
we
on the Little
are.
Less Fear podcast. Where can our viewers, our watchers, and our listeners get a hold of you and find you if they need you?
On ghosthelpers.com or tinairwin.com. And, let me know what you think of the podcast. And my books are there. And I just love being on the show. And Lino, I cannot thank you enough. We are an awesome team.
We really are. Oh, and coming soon, Tina has a new book coming out on psychic children, in which I'm really looking forward to discuss in a future podcast. So thank you. Stay tuned, everyone. Have a magical day. Wishing you all love and light. So much love to everybody. Thank you so much.
Bye bye.